His name is Mark. Say hi to Mark.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
He's in New York, but he'll hear you.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio today, sitting across the podcast table, a dear friend.
Yes.
And someone that we've recently attended a few shows together.
We have indeed.
I had a good time. Jana Utes is with us. Jana is in the music business, and what I love about Jana is she has opinions that I actually like hearing, because you are a breath of fresh air in this business, and you're not afraid to call a spade if it needs to be. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Not everyone feels that way, but hey. That's life.
Well, obviously on our podcast, we talk about the business end of the music industry. And one of the things that you and I had a conversation over one day, I think it was over coffee or a meal, we talked about the artists that come to town and don't really have a clear perspective of what it takes to make it in this business. And honestly, we haven't touched on that too much in this business. What's your opinion?
So it's an interesting scenario as to how things have changed. Public perception, I would say, in the past 20 or so years. I would say that it's coupled with the fact that we got into the whole business of making people feel self-confident and not wanting anyone to feel like they were a loser. In the late 90s, early 2000s, everybody gets a trophy. We saw the breakdown of the arts in the public school system. So all of a sudden, there was no outlet, so to speak, in a lot of cities for people who had musical talent. A lot of the programs were closing down because of lack of funds, or there were so many children that wanted to be a part of it. Teachers were forced to have auditions, and so everyone didn't get to do it. And then you also had the advent of these talent shows, the reality talent shows that came. So my perspective is that has created an entirely misconception of, number one, what the definition of talent is, number two, what it takes to really be successful, and number three, when to know whether or not you should walk away because it's actually not going to happen for you. You
said everyone expecting a participation trophy. But
yes.
The reality is, not everybody gets a record deal. Not everybody gets a contract with an agent or a manager.
Not everybody gets to have the promotion. Not everybody gets the bonus that goes to the person who had the top sales figures of the year. So we somehow think that this business is different from other businesses. I can tell you when it first started dawning on me as a parent. My children, listening to this will not be surprised that I'm telling this story, but in our family, we're on the spectrum. So it was the early ages of learning about autism, things like Asperger's and things like attention deficit disorder, which, let me be very clear, is a real gift in the arts, because you will find that portion of the brain usually works more efficiently. Which is very, very interesting if you study, and he's laughing, but he knows what I'm talking about. If you study great musicians everywhere from Beethoven and Mozart to Lady Gaga and Elvis, as a matter of fact. So I started really having to delve into the psychological side of things, just being a parent, and looking at what it took to help my children succeed, but also not cripple them in the process. Because anytime you're talking about something that can be a stigma, in the public perception or something, even at school, okay, on the schoolyard with kids thinking that you were different. As a parent, I was thinking, how do I make my children understand that no one's perfect and everyone is unique, and that brings problems along with talents. And so that was actually the beginning of my journey, because my children are both musically talented, but we were looking at the issue of them being perceived as maybe being different or not quite as good. And then we were doing the normal things that go on in a community. The kids wanted to play ball, be in dance, school, and things like that. But everyone was getting a trophy. So me trying to motivate them to be better and say, look, you're not going to get the home run if you don't practice. Your team won't go to the World Series if you aren't doing your part as a teammate, was actually undermined. So at that time, I was running a studio out of my home. So I was teaching up-and-coming artists or just parents who were frustrated that their children were not getting any music education in the school. And I find myself having to have the same conversations with them, because when you're starting out as a musician, especially in a small town, you're looking for things like the school beauty pageant, and you've got to win the talent competition, or you want to be in the show choir, or there's going to be a musical at the local community theater, and you want to try out for the lead. And so you learn real fast if you're starting to get into something that's seriously performance-based, in which a decision will be made. Everyone can't get the trophy. You can't give 6 people the lead and they're going to all share it. You learn real fast that that's a faulty mindset. But I think that we have allowed that to actually continue with things like the reality shows. Actually, and I see that I think driving a lot of the faulty things that people have misconstrued about the industry. The old saying, and I tell people this all the time, you can tell by the look in their face, a lot of times they don't believe it, but the old story about there being a starving artist, waiting to make it is pretty true. You have to pretty well understand that you can't have it all. There is going to be something that suffers if you're going to give your best in an industry that almost requires a 24/7 presence. It's just the way it is.
And you brought up, I think, a valid point in that when you say you give your all to this, there's a sacrifice involved, whether it's family or friends or other parts of your lifestyle.
100%.
Your socializing goes out the window. Your being able to, I missed class reunions. I missed weddings. I missed,
of course,
my kids' birthday parties because
Christmas.
My commitment. I don't think I ever missed Christmas. I missed Thanksgiving twice.
Right.
I know that. And I missed New Year's more than not, because New Year's is always a busy time for our business. But that's a sacrifice back then as a young man I was willing to make. Now, in retrospect, and looking at my kids, and thank God they still love me and even like me. But that, for me now, looking back, that's a tough pill for me to swallow, because, okay, I coached their hockey teams when I was in town, and,
sure.
and I made sure they made it to basketball and baseball and lacrosse and whatever else they were in. But you give up so much, and what do you get in return? That's the false hope that a lot of artists, aspiring artists, have when they get into this business.
Right.
It's called a reality check.
It is. And one of the reasons I eventually ended up in Nashville and basically transitioned over to country music, which was not in my background at all. It was not played in my home.
Well, what was your background?
My background was actually church music and classical music. My mother went to college as a piano major, and for whatever reason, I think they offered her a scholarship in Oregon if she would switch over, and she did. So I grew up the daughter of church musicians, and we did things like go to classical concerts in Memphis and in our community, and then, of course, doing local theater, where I learned to love, Broadway musicals. And that's what we watched at home. I did watch Elvis movies some, but it was not something that was being played in my house. I remember this so vividly. When I was 10 years old, I got it was bright blue transistor radio for Christmas. I think my sisters and I all got one, and they were different colors. Mine was bright blue. And I found WHBQ in Memphis. And that's when really a new world opened up to me. Pop music, country music, things other than what I had been listening to at home.
Had you been musically isolated up to that point? I mean, had your parents built, for lack of better words, had they built a wall around you musically?
They had. Yeah, pretty much. I can remember, my mom, if I was kind of singing along with something, she would say, make sure you don't sing through your nose. I don't want you to sound like any of those country singers. Or, as I got older and before I was driving and we would be driving somewhere, I would ask my mom if I could turn on the radio. And I would always, of course, turn on WHBQ, but most of the time I had to turn it off because she didn't care for it. And it's interesting because she grew up in the 50s but she just never cared for Elvis or anything in that direction. Now, the other thing that was going on in my background was in West Tennessee in the late 70s, early 80s, you had a lot of black musicians making their mark in the pubs and the little back alley clubs and things that were out, what would have been called on the Chitlin circuit.
Right.
So you had Ike and Tina Turner, you had B.B. King, and
you even had Jimi Hendrix on some of that.
Yeah, 100%. So they were playing the clubs in the area. And back then there was a jukebox circuit. So that would be the modern form of probably karaoke now, where you can go and there's a DJ and you look up any song that you want on, whatever system they have, and it's immediately accessible. Where back then you had jukeboxes. It was probably a nickel a play at that time. And so what people who were doing the jukebox routes noticed quickly was that the white teenagers who were packing their clubs, their mother didn't know that they were there. Their mom and dad did not know that they were there, but that's what they were spending their music on. And so I started paying attention and thinking, okay, I've got to be missing out on something here. And I also realized that there are a lot of things that happen sometimes that are not as happenstance as you may think. So I've thought about this a lot recently because of the Elvis movie. Have you seen it?
Haven't seen it yet, no.
Okay, so the Elvis movie, I think it's a fabulous movie, and I would tell everybody to see it. There are some liberties that are taken with the storyline, and part of that is because I grew up in an area where a lot of people knew Elvis. A lot of people had an Elvis story, and I was aware of what was going on in the time. But I also realized that in the length of a storyline of a 2-hour movie, 2.5-hour movie, that you've got to condense things so that the story is told as completely as possible. But one of the things that maybe people don't realize is that Sam Phillips was actually already looking for someone that sounded like Elvis. He happened to be the person that walked through the door first. Now, you're going to have Colonel Tom Parker as part of that story and part of that mix. But he had already put the word out on the street that he was looking for a white soul singer that sounded black. So that actually, I think, plays into the way I started this whole segment, in that there is more of a process than people might think. There are people in the industry who are looking for something different, or they do have an idea of what they think the public wants to hear. It's not magic that someone, who has been around for 8 to 10 years automatically gets a record deal out of the blue. There's such much more that goes into it than that. And that also plays into what's going on, with the reality TV series. They're scripted. People don't realize they're scripted much more. I've actually coached a lot of the people who have performed on the shows. I've had students or artists that were actually requested to try out. They actually put out feelers and invite local talent to try out. Everybody's got to remember this is a business. Number one, they want to make money. Number two, they don't want to look stupid on national TV. So it's not actually what you think, that there's these young people that have never had a chance and things of that nature.
Right.
There are some of those, But let me tell you, if a 13-year-old tries out for, let's say, American Idol, and they're going to get the golden ticket, I can promise you they've been singing since they're 3. They almost come out of the womb singing. This is not a 13-year-old that decided the week before that they're going to sing. So when you look at how natural talent works and how things develop musically in the brain, and people that are exceptionally gifted, they are going to accelerate very quickly. Leanne Rimes is a perfect example of that. So is Tanya Tucker. So you're looking at children who were naturally gifted already at age 3, getting up and singing in a manner that most children are. A lot of 3-year-olds are really just starting to put sentences together and talk clearly. So that's not a normal scenario. It's not. And so understanding that difference, I think, is important. And I think it's the kindest thing, to do for people.
In the studio with us here in Nashville, Tennessee, Jana Utes.
Hi, this is David Stark, the editor and publisher of Songlink International, the author of a book about me and the Beatles titled It's All Too Much, and I'm also the drummer of the Trembling Wilburys tribute band, and you're going to hear all about this in my talk with Bob on the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives, whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena. And believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
You're listening to the business side of music.
You brought up something that's interesting, and a lot of people don't know this unless you do your homework. And that is Leanne Rimes was actually on Star Search. That's how she got her break. Ed McMahon's Star Search.
Correct.
And I want to say she was 9, 10, maybe 11
So was
years
Justin
old.
Timberlake.
Oh, see, now I didn't know
So he
that.
segued from,
Wasn't he on the
Mickey Mouse Club into
right.
Star Search. And so something very similar. I know Justin's family from the same area that he's in, and he used to show up around town and sing the special music for church services and things like that. His granddad is a pastor there in the area. So, and Justin's a perfect example of having musical ability, using what resources he could to put himself in a place where he could be found. Okay.
Right.
And then making that commitment. Luck is a part of it, but I'm a firm believer you make a lot of that luck. If Justin had stayed in West Tennessee and said, I'm going to wait for someone to discover me, or I'm going to wait till I can win a show when they come through town and I get to try out, we might not know who he is.
I think I've mentioned this on one of the episodes in the past, but I remember when I was in Los Angeles, I had a line producer who knew me, who called me up for one of the major talent shows, and I'm not going to name which one it is. But she said to me, I'm looking for some artists, some singers for our show, and here's the criteria.
Right.
And that's all she was looking for.
Exactly.
Now, that doesn't mean that they were going to fill the whole schedule with that. That's just what she was looking for at that particular moment.
Right.
You know, redheaded, bushy-bearded guys could also get on there when they were ready. But at that exact moment, that's what she was looking for to fill a slot.
Correct.
Okay. So I happen to have had someone that fit that criteria. And she went down and she got a private audition. She didn't have to do the cattle call. Mm-hmm. She got the private audition in front of the line producer. And she made it, I think, to one more step. And that was it.
Right.
Because guess what? I wasn't the only one that this line producer or line producers were calling. They were calling 100 people like me.
Always.
Trying to find that individual, because that cattle call of 10,000 people lining the street trying to get into the arena to get an audition, you know, that's a 1 in a million shot.
So, and that's a perfect point for me to mention something that's just happened with an artist that I was working with that has some considerable talent, but it's a perfect example, I think, of when someone is a little bit too naive and not as understanding as they should be about the music industry, and also the nature of the fact that you can't trust everyone, is there are a lot of companies that will have some sort of a big splash contest, okay? And it's a vote for dollar for charity type of scenario. And it works very similarly to these reality shows in which, you know, if you get a certain number of people to call in and vote for you, and every call or every text or every email is $1, the money goes to charity. But what, unfortunately, the unsuspecting musician does not realize is they are telling all the thousands of people out there that they're in the finals. So you have people that literally stop their career to go out and try to win a contest in which, you know, they're not even legitimately in the running. And so there's a lot of this going on, and there's a lot of misconception also, again, about even what that would do for your career. So, and here's another part of that. This particular contest, the winner gets to open for what is so far an unnamed band. Okay, that should, of course, give you cause for concern right there. We don't know who the band is. If you try to research, it'll say, well, here's who it's been in the past. It could be one of them, for instance. But the reality is, even if, you know, and I'm sure there'll be a winner. I'm not saying it's not a contest where they'll pick a winner. What I'm saying is what they're leading the average person to believe in order to make money is suspect. Also, you can do some research and find out how much of that money went to whatever charity they're promoting, and it's always a very small percentage.
Let's go beyond even that. And that artist who's going out and getting votes. Let's take the financial equation out of it for a moment. There's no money involved. It's just, hey, I need you to vote for me, and, you know, the person that gets the most vote wins. So you get that opportunity to get in front of an audience on a stage and open for XYZ. And it's probably somebody of some substance that's got some history and has got a following. I've been there with some artists who have had the opportunity to open for some major acts. That and $5 will get you a cup of coffee somewhere.
Right.
It doesn't really amount to a lot.
Doesn't mean anything.
And I see it so often. People will send me bios, you know, of, hey, this is my music and this is who I've opened for.
I've opened for.
And the list is a long,
of course,
celebrity call.
Of course. Yeah.
But I say to myself, okay, you've opened up for 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 people. What has that got you? You know, other than some immediate exposure. Let's face reality. When you're on that stage opening for that particular artist or that particular act, I'm sorry, the reality is they're not there to see you. They're there to see that act.
And how many bands or artists have you worked with knew who their opening act was?
Not too many.
Exactly.
Unless it was an opening act that had a slot on the tour.
Right.
And guess what? Those aren't given out. Those aren't free.
Those are not free.
Typically, not always, but typically an opening slot on a tour is generated either by the agency the management or the record label.
It's been earned.
And it's been earned.
Correct.
And there's probably some cost involved.
Correct.
The opening act has to offset some of the production costs. You got to pay for part of the sound. You got to pay for part of the lights. If you're traveling on one of the buses, you got to, they
merchandise.
They don't give you that stuff.
Correct.
So, yeah.
My heart always breaks for artists who are allowing themselves to be misled. But also, I think that, and this is where I got to in my career, ultimately, the root of being a success, in my opinion, is teachability, period.
Asking questions.
Correct.
Yeah.
Nothing. And again, I will, if you've seen the Elvis movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. Or, if you've read any biographies or listen closely to artists who have had success, if you'll really listen to their interviews, they don't expect anybody to give them anything. And they listen to the people who are guiding their career. There's trust, and they are willing to admit they don't know it all. And let me tell you, all of us are that way. There's not a person on earth who can say, if they're being honest, I can't learn something new every day of my life.
So what are those questions that need to be asked by that new artist who's trying to get a foot in the door? Is there a set of standard questions, or is it different in every environment?
The very first question I always ask is, how teachable are you? I mean, I throw that out there. Most of them will tell you they are, of course.
Yeah.
But I listen very carefully to what their answer is and what they think teachability means, because anybody that's in a position of working with someone that's going to need guidance, if that person doesn't want to hear what you have to say, or they want to be coddled, or they don't call you back, yeah, I hear what you're saying, I want to work with you, and you don't hear from them but twice a month, and they're not even letting you know what's going on. They're telling you, well, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm doing, and I'm thinking, okay, no, wait a minute. We were talking about needing to stop what we were doing and make a plan and talk about the things that need to be better, tighter, more efficient, and ways where we're bleeding. So that's number one. But then closely after that, as I say, I want you to tell me who your audience is. And I know I'm in trouble if that person doesn't know.
That is probably the first red flag, or at least yellow flag, that goes up if you don't know who your audience is, because then that ultimately says you don't know who you are as yourself.
Correct. I will always ask them to submit like a purpose statement to me, or what would be considered a brand analogy. A lot of companies do this. They will get together and they'll say, who are we and what do we stand for? And in X number of words, anybody that comes to our website or buys our product.
It's basically a mission statement.
A mission statement.
Yeah.
Correct. I rarely find one that has that. So it's very, very interesting. When you look at a place like Nashville, where there's talent on every corner, you would think that that would be something that would be more in the consciousness. It's not. And there's no shortage of books, programs, podcasts such as this one. I've been looking at interviews where you can't learn. But when I talk to a lot of artists or musicians, they have no clue what I'm talking about, or they spend no time trying to develop this. I'll say this, being a musician myself, we don't typically like to get into the business side of things. We don't. We like to make music. We're concerned about our art. We want to get out there and connect with people. But I'm going to be pretty bold in saying, right now, that any artist who's unwilling to delve into that, you will not make it. You won't.
I agree.
There's no way you can know who you need to be as an artist and waiting for someone else to totally do it all for you. Now, and I'm going to reference the Elvis film again because I've seen it twice lately and I've just thought about it so much. But it takes a village. It takes a village. So we basically got Elvis Presley, who changed the course of music because, number one, he was influenced in a way that made him different from any other singer okay, of his generation. And you couple that with the fact that you had Sam Phillips and Colonel Tom Parker looking for exactly who Elvis was. You had the fact that you had a family at home that was supportive, okay? And then you had a kid who was not only willing to do whatever he took, he had absolute 100% ironclad trust in his mentor. Now, that came back to haunt him in some ways. Everybody knows that story if you know the story of Colonel Tom Parker. But I'm going to tell you, there would not have been Elvis without him.
No,
period. Would not have been. End of story.
Yep, I agree. In the studio with us here in Nashville, Tennessee, Jana Utes.
Hey, everybody, this is Lori Morgan. I want you to check out my program on the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio, Jana Utes is sitting across the podcast table here, Nashville, Tennessee, business side of music. It takes a village, or at the very least, it takes an individual that you have to trust. And I like what you said. As an artist, we don't like to get into the business aspect of things. And I consider myself a creative person. That's why I do this. And it's tough to go, okay, there is a business side to this. How do we make that work? What is it that we make to work?
Right.
And Tom Sabello, who was my business partner, that's what he did every single day. He was, almost never saw him on camera. You almost never saw him in front of the microphone or behind the microphone. But he handled, 6, 7, 8 hours every day. And we'd have 2, sometimes 3 phone conversations in a day. And I trusted him. And I think we made a good team. So if it's not a village, it's at least a team of the artist and the manager, or the artist and the consultant. Well, somebody to at least a good sounding board and provide some sage sound advice.
Correct.
To steer you in the right direction.
It does eventually take a village, because you're going to have people who believe in you enough to go on tour and not make much money. You've got people who be willing to work the merch table, a spouse or a significant other or children who are willing to wait for things to turn around in your career. One of the things I will tell the people, just because I think it's so important to be honest and not do the fairy tale thing with people, is say, you're going to have to choose to let some things, go down the list of importance in your life. And one of those must not be your family. And I will tell every single person who I talk to, if there's someone important in their life, I suggest that you set a goal or a date or a time limit to make this happen in your career. Mm-hmm. Your family does not deserve to starve forever. And I think that's very, very important. One of the things that really, really bothers me as a woman is seeing the number of male artists. And just because anybody can argue there's just more males on the mainstream, that you're going to hear about all the time than females, is the number of women who've stayed home as wives and mothers and they hold the line for as long as they can, and
Right.
the dam finally breaks. They just can't do it anymore, and they're pushed aside. They're pushed aside, and a younger person replaces them. You hear interviews once someone gets a Grammy or whatever, and they're giving all the praise to this new person, and you've left tattered dreams behind because you left a family that did believe in you, and they did sacrifice, and they forgot. And I'm going to tie that back into how I started: is you got to be teachable, and you need to realize that the people who love you are going to tell you the truth. They're going to tell you the truth. And I would caution anybody who is only hearing you're great, you're wonderful. If grandma thinks you're going to win American Idol, but a talent manager says, we need to talk about this, that's not exactly going to happen. That should be the key, or that should be the signal that you found the right person to listen to, not the opposite.
Exactly. It comes down to what we've said earlier. Trusting someone enough that they can guide you and point you in the right direction. But you also, as the artist, have to be willing to listen.
Correct.
That's without a doubt the most important thing. And I know you've had some relationships from an artist, manager, artist, consultant perspective.
Right.
Where and we have too, where you tell the artist, this is what needs to be done, in this order, in this time frame, and they kind of almost poo-poo you, or they say, yeah, I got it. And then they go in a totally different direction anyway. And at that point, they're not teachable. They're not manageable. So you really have to kind of just wipe your hands and walk away.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I didn't mention, and it plays a little bit into my story of where I am now, is the fact that I'm a vocal coach and a vocal rehabilitation expert. It has to do with my own journey and having problems in the past, and I don't sing professionally anymore because of that. But what I did learn was how to rehabilitate a voice, how be able to, it's crystal clear to me when someone has the talent that it takes. I have an exceptional ear. And so if I tell somebody something, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not flapping my gums. I'm not making up stuff. But we have to be to the point where we're willing to hear that. I know you have a big audience of people who are worldwide. I want to speak to them just a minute and say, we want to hear people from different cultures. We want to hear talent that's different than what we have. We want to welcome you. And I'm very happy, particularly to see the breakdown of genres, and that people who don't look like us and don't sound like us should be welcome. And I think that's the beauty of where the modern music industry is now. It's a worldwide audience. It should be. It's what's right. And I think that it's what makes us all better humans and better musicians.
How can people find you?
Well, I'm not real easy to find.
Which could be good, I guess.
Right. I am on social media under my name, Facebook, Jana Jones Utes. It's probably the best way to find me, either through actually just sending me a private message on there is probably the best. I can also I don't mind giving my email address, which
Absolutely.
is my name, janautes@yahoo.com. And I will do my best to reach out and respond to people and answer questions that they have. And I'm also willing to listen if someone has a different point of view. One other thing I would like to say in talking about genres and whether or not someone fits into a certain thing and things of that nature. We would not have had Elvis if we weren't ready to realize as a country and as a nation, our young people didn't want to listen to our music. They don't. And that's the nature and beauty of art. It is supposed to change. It is supposed to evolve. We need to get over the fact that our kids don't want to listen to our music. This is a big controversy going on right now in country music. What's country? Should it be country? We've got some of the most esteemed artists that that built the foundation of country music that are being very, very negative about what's being played on the radio right now. I want to say shame on you. What difference does it make? What difference does it make? And that's what we want. We want our industry to grow. We want the genre to change and become reflective of what people are listening to, and we need to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because that's the beauty of art. It never stays the same. It never have, and it never will.
Thank you so much what a wonderful and enlightening conversation.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be here.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.